Hello, fellow clowns, and thank you for joining us for the 39th Clown Fiesta podcast, Blue Jay and JNT 250, bringing you every episode. So why not this one? This week, but before we get into
Do you
things, we
just
want to
call
shout
our
out all the...
viewers clowns, just by the way?
Yes, they are all clowns. Thank you for joining us, you clowns.
Okay.
They're lovable clowns.
I didn't sign off on this. I just want you all to know.
Anyways, so we had a lot of new viewers last week, and so JNT and I really wanted to shout out all the people that found our podcast last week and really supported us. We got a huge bump in viewership, and so it's nice to have all of you guys along, so thank you so much. And for those that haven't yet, consider subscribing if you enjoy the content. And for those that don't know, we do a live show every week on Monday nights, 9:15 PST, and then 12:15 just past midnight EST. So yeah, feel free to check us out on Twitch as well. Now let's just get right into things. We got lots to talk about this week. We got some LPL stuff. We're probably going to start with the match fixing stuff. We're going to get into some MSI patch notes, some MSI stuff about the different teams, and we're going to talk some proving grounds. So lots of different areas we're going this week. Let's get into the LPL match fixing because not everyone is aware of this, but there were some issues with LPL match fixing, and they decided to lay down the ban hammer. Some people very happy with this, some people very not. JNT, where do you fall on this? Or should I start off? Maybe I should start off with saying who got banned.
Yeah, I guess we can start with that.
Let's do that. Okay, so for both two players rather from Thunder Talk is the team from LPL got banned. Bless is one of them. He got banned for 12 months, and Teen got banned for 4 months. Now, that's those two players, and then FPX Bo, who I believe is a sub, he got a 4-month ban as well. So a lot of people unhappy with the 4-month bans and more happy with the 12-month. JNT, where do you kind of fall on this?
Because the thing is, I remember when we first brought up or first heard about this topic, and I instantly just went back to the whole CS:GO match fixing scandal that I referenced then and I'll reference again. If you don't know or didn't follow CS:GO, a team way back in the day, iBuyPower, basically it's four out of its 5 starting members got basically permabanned from all CS:GO events way back in the day for, the same sort of thing, match fixing. And it just seemed that initially when I heard about these match fixing allegations in the first place, I was like, oh shit, it's going to be another one of those. And then to hear all of these bans, I don't think they're, enough. I think match fixing is a huge problem and just really can ruin a league and can ruin, people's careers and can ruin, hype and, just the entertainment of the league itself. You don't want to go into a match and you later find out that it's fixed. How shit must that feel?
It ruins so much, man. And that's the thing. So for people wondering why such small penalties, well, I guess what they said was because some of the players came forward and confessed, it made the investigations a lot easier, and because they want to encourage people coming forward to, if they have done these kinds of things in the past, that's why they got lower bans. Apparently, that's basically what they're saying. And to me, I'm okay with that idea, but 4 months, regardless of
seem
how
like enough.
Yeah, it just doesn't. Regardless of how little or how much you were involved in match fixing, you don't do that. And to your point, there's players that got permabanned for this stuff in CS. Do I think that's where they should have gone with it? No, I don't. But I definitely don't think players should be eligible to play anymore this year after that happens. And to your point, it ruins so many things. One, the integrity of the league. And there was a comment that was honestly kind of an ignorant comment. I know that sounds like a meme, but it really was on Twitter. But I will read it anyways. It said, "You sure FPX didn't throw the final as well? Because the plays the LWX and Tian were making didn't add up." Keck W, right? Here's the thing. While that's a stupid comment because I don't think you can label every other player just because some players did some stuff, I think that you are going to have people that lose faith in the league. And that's why I bring up that comment. Even though, no, I don't think it's fair to just label LWX and Tien that way because they had rough series. I do think you have to start wondering how many other players didn't come forward. Because there were players that did, sure, but maybe they all didn't come forward and maybe they all didn't get caught. And maybe there's still players in the league that have been approached and are maybe match fixing, maybe as we speak. I don't know. But that's one of the problems is, Jesus, this is just not enough when you don't. Yeah, the integrity of the league is just out the window now, and you don't have any faith in anyone, perhaps.
Yeah, and even just to circle back to the penalties that the players received, because I will just clear something up. The whole CS:GO situation. Those players over time, I think it was only about 4 years later, they actually did get unbanned for certain tournaments, and I just feel that like these bans specifically, it's not enough of a punishment to what was going on. And looking back on it, do I think that those CS:GO players should have been completely permabanned? No. Do I think they should have gotten very harsh penalties for what they did? Yes. And
Completely agree.
yes, you can argue that they were probably banned for a little bit longer than was necessary because it was like 4 years or something. But I think at the minimum, it should be 1 year, regardless of your involvement. Like regardless of your situation, if you were one of those players coming forward, if you're involved in this kind of a thing, as we just mentioned, it can just completely ruin reputations of teams, players, and the league itself. So I'm definitely a little bit on the side of the 4 month bans are maybe a little too short. But overall, the LPL does have to start cracking down on these things. And like you said, who knows what else is still out there with this topic.
Well, and now you've set what I think is a really dangerous precedent, right? Because if someone else gets caught doing this, they could say, well, how come those guys only got 4 months? Like
Mm-hmm.
I came forward with mine, I should only get 4 months. And like, that's like, I don't know, man. I don't like that at all. Maybe it's not a precedent. Maybe it's not. Maybe the LPL comes out and says, look, we gave 4 months, but this is a strict warning to everyone in the future now, blah, 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 will be X penalties and blah, blah, blah. But I don't know if you can just do that. I don't know. Yeah, that's a precedent that I don't think they want to set, and I think they may have done that with this penalty.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy stuff. Again, I was just surprised in the first place when all this came out. And to be honest, I thought this whole investigation was going to take longer than it actually was, because I think we brought up this topic
Yeah.
like a month and a half ago. So
Yeah, I remember there was players that were banned early March, I want to say. So I think you're right. I
yeah,
think it was about a month and a half. A couple other things. Sorry, did I cut you off? Was there anything else that you were
no,
trying to say there?
it's just a weird situation.
Yeah, so a couple of other ways I want to go with this is one, should the LCS look at this and go, or not even just the LCS, but the LEC or the LCK or whatever, any other region, look at this and go, maybe we should have some strict rules in place now and give teams their warnings now. Because, like I said before, if the integrity of the LPL is now called into question, that would be devastating for the LCS, which has already seen what I would say is a pretty significant drop in viewership, right? If the integrity of the league is out the window for the LCS, that's one thing. The other thing that I would say is maybe these players aren't so well known, but there are a lot of players that look, these guys are young players, right? Like everyone in the league is young. Everyone makes stupid mistakes when they're young, and I think that these players need to be protected by the league and by the owners and maybe the LCS Players Association, KEKW, because you can't say LCS Players Association without saying KEKW. But what I think is you should be able to educate these players on, look, there's a good chance someone approaches you and offers you this, and this is what you need to understand you're risking if you take this kind of, well, I guess it's a bribe, right? I think you need to be worried of that. And I also think, what if it's a player that could be the next, let's use LPL, Doinby, or if you want to use the LCS, could be the next Bjergsen or something like that. And I know people are thinking these players would never do something like that. And maybe that's true, but you don't know. And this could be ruining some of our future stars in Pro League of Legends, and I think that's another thing that just absolutely sucks.
Yeah, I mean, what I hope that the rest of the world takes away from this is that they can implement the necessary procedures and measures to make sure that this doesn't become a problem. And if it does become a problem, what are the measures that they need to take to, like give correct punishments, fine whomever probably needs to be fined in that case scenario, and just have a plan set in place if this does occur.
Yeah, that's what I want, and I'm sure they probably do have something, but I don't know. This is, to me, should act as a wake-up call in case they don't have something, or maybe they need to revisit what that something
Exactly.
looks like and make sure it's all written in stone. And if I'm like Jack or Steve or any of the owners or any of the coaches, I am going to my players immediately and saying, look, guys, we need to make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen. You need to understand you can completely ruin your career for this kind of thing. And the other thing I would say is another way to prevent it, which is not an easy way of preventing it, but a way nonetheless, is you need to pay your players enough. And I know that's such a forehead thing to say, right? Like, oh, pay your players more, lol. Like, of course. But I think that there's a certain amount of money that your players need to make for them to realize that their career is valuable, and they are not like, they're not drawn towards wanting to take a bribe from an outside source to throw a game or to match fix in any way. Um, I don't know what the obvious answer to that is, because more money doesn't just come out of nowhere, but I do think that it still would be a way of preventing players from taking those kinds of bribes.
Hmm.
That's pretty much all I had to say on it. Is this is an and I'm worried for the LPL. I'm worried for all the other leagues, and it's just a really unfortunate thing, because some of these players might have ruined their careers. There's a chance they don't ever get on a team again. Who knows?
Yeah.
Um, let's get into MSI, right? You want to get into MSI and talk about
It's
patch
happening. It's like 10
11.9?
days away now or something.
Yeah, God,
11
the
days.
the time is coming quick. So, for people that are unaware, the LCS playoffs were played on 11.5. And then in other regions they were played on 11.6. MSI will be played on 11.9, as we mentioned. And there is a bunch of different changes through patch 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, and now 0.9. You have 4 patches of changes. And so obviously we think that there's going to be a lot of effects on MSI with this. Now, don't worry, guys. We're not going to go through absolutely every buff and nerf. We don't want to go an hour on this stuff, but we do want to highlight the stuff that we think will be significant when it comes time for MSI. So, J&T, I'll let you start. Where do you want to start with this? Do you want to go patch by patch? Is there a certain champion you're looking at, certain player you think that's
Well,
affected? I'll let you take the
I
reins here.
think we probably just start with jungle because I think it's probably the most talked about role in terms of the champions that are in the meta right now and just the way that the role functions. Because
And thank fucking God, right? Because I
yeah,
think we were kind of getting fed up with Udyr Hecarim. And I'm not saying that it won't be there. It's possible that we still see Udyr and Hecarim, but there's been a lot of changes, and hopefully that change that does come into effect for MSI. But anyways, go ahead.
yeah. To your point though, Hecarim Udyr meta has been getting pretty boring. It's been going on for like the better half of like a month and a half. And yeah, it's not very fun when the draft is pretty much always blue side picks Hecarim and red side takes Udyr every single game. Because it's what happens pretty much every single game. Like you'll get the odd like Lilia thrown in there, and in the LCS at least we've seen like a little bit of Nocturne, which is cool to see. But other than that, it's all Hecarim Udyr, and Hecarim has been getting a bunch of nerfs. I think it got nerfed on basically every single patch, minus 11.8. And Udyr's also gotten some other small nerfs, but also Chemting is getting nerfed, which I think that's kind of like the biggest reasoning for why these champions have been so popular in the first place, and why they're so strong is because the move speed that they get synergized with Chemtank is just really OP. So I think with all the nerfs to Hecarim, Udyr, and Chemtank, we're probably going to see less of them during MSI. Less being less prioritized and maybe not seeing them at all. But again, we'll have to see. But on the other side of things, there's been a ton of other jungle champions that have been buffed and been changed. The main ones I want to highlight are Volibear and Morgana, because I think those are probably the 2 champions that have benefited the most from buffs. Volibear got a bunch of buffs on 11.6 to his jungle clearing, and even in other regions, we saw Volibear actually get quite a lot of play when Hecarim or Udyr kind of wasn't available, and I kind of see that happening with all these other nerfs coming in.
So I want to talk a little bit about Morg, but I want to talk about it later. Don't let me forget, okay?
Okay.
I'm so gonna forget, man. But anyways, I completely agree. Did you mention Xin Zhao at all? His changes?
I was gonna get to that, but was that where are you going with that?
So I was gonna go with Xin Zhao just because he is, to me, a completely new champion. Like, yes, I know a lot of his abilities are pretty much the same, but his W is not, and now his E can follow when he lands his W. And so this champion is so much more mobile than he was before. And that was, to me, probably his biggest weakness, was he was a little bit immobile. He had a short dash with his E, but now that thing is long if you can land your W, and your clear speed is so much better. We didn't really see it. I don't even know if we saw it at all in LEC
Well, it's
playoffs.
funny
They played
because
0.6, right? And the changes came in 0.6.
Yeah, I was gonna save this for a little bit later when we were talking about jungle, because there were like a couple other champions I was gonna mention. But with Xin Zhao, I looked up just to see what his stats were, because as we've said, there were a lot of other regions that were playing on 11.6, and the stats have been pretty bad.
Not
from
good.
What I've seen.
Yeah,
I think
I could tell from your voice.
I think it saw like 11 or 12 games in a bunch of and this was across like the entire world, and I think it had one win. And
So
obviously, you can't just take away from that the champion's terrible, but it just seems that it's not getting picked a lot, and when it is getting picked, it's not having the best results. So I'm not exactly sure, what that means for the champion going forward, but I think that there are just other jungle champions that have gotten better changes and are probably better suited for the meta, like the Volibear, like potentially the Morgana, as because she's gotten some pretty insane buffs on 11.8 to her W, which makes her clear just absolutely cracked. We even saw before these Morgana nerfs, we saw Broxah actually whip up the Morgana jungle one time in towards the end of the regular season.
yeah. And that was when her monster damage, I think it was on her, I don't
On her
remember if it was
W.
just all monsters, it's just her W. Okay.
Yeah.
Was about 150%. They buffed it up to 200 and brought it back down to 185. So to me, even though she got a nerf on the last patch and she lost that 15%,
Still pretty strong.
she still got a 35% buff in my eyes. So yeah, but again, I still want to get to that later, and you'll understand why in a bit. But I want to go to bat a little bit more for Xin Zhao and say that one, as you pretty much said, like the sample size is low, like 12 games is not that many. But the other thing as well is maybe that could have been because Chem Tank was still such a meta thing, and everyone needed to be playing Udyr or Hecarim for them to, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And so it could have been because of that. I'm not saying it is, and I'm not saying we will see Xin Zhao, but it's just one that I'm going to have my eye on, and because the changes are, it made that champion so much better than he was. Whether he's good enough to be played at MSI, that remains to be seen. But and I also do like your point about the Volibear as well, because I believe his clear was improved, right, with his E. Yeah, so that's something that we've seen Volibear be played in jungle for the last year or so. It's come in and out of meta, so it wouldn't be too surprising to see it come back. And so many plays, especially at the higher levels, being MSI and Worlds, we see so many plays happen with dive plays where teams are defenseless and they have nowhere to run, and that's one thing Volibear does really well with this ultimate. So that's something that we could see there as well. Now, anything on that before I get back to the Morgana stuff now?
No, you're good.
So the reason why I wanted to save Morgana was because I noticed some other buffs like Lulu and Kog'Maw and Shen. Now, whenever you see those things all buffed, you're thinking Kog'Maw comps, you're thinking Lulu Cog, and one thing that Morgana can do is, first of all, she clears hella quick, so she actually gets pretty strong just by farming camps, but she's also that black shield for a Kog'Maw, and I know this is going to sound like I'm memeing, but we saw it run in our Clash games a couple weeks ago. I know, what a freaking meme that is. Anyways, and it's OP. Like Kog'Maw is getting so many buffs. Lulu is great with the Kog'Maw, and we're going to see. I mean, maybe Kog'Maw just gets banned, and therefore the Morgana isn't needed. But it's just an extra. Like, you love having the double supportive picks for a champion like Kog, so we can just go nuts. And so that would be another reason for why I think Morgana could be played. And maybe even without the Kog'Maw, her clear is just that good that it's worth picking up. That is yet to be seen. But there's so many things that are good with the Kog'Maw, and it's getting buffed. And I think Morgana is one of those. So look out for that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think you have to limit it just like a Kog'Maw thing. Like the Black Shield is just a great utility spell in general. It's useful on any ADC. Yeah. It's useful on any mid laner that wants to, like, if you're playing somewhat of like an assassin mid. Akali's been getting a lot of changes in 11.6, and she saw a lot of play in the LPL and a lot of play in EU Masters and some fringe play elsewhere. But I definitely think we'll see a lot of Akali at MSI, and maybe that kind of pairs well with it. The only other jungle champion I was going to mention, because I think due to some of the players that are at MSI has a chance of coming in, is Kindred.
I think I know where you're going with this. Yeah, baby. Let's go.
Kindred's got she's been getting a bunch of small changes over time, not limited to just these more recent patches. She's been getting a lot of buffs over the course of Season 11. And I think, with the two junglers, specifically Blabber and Canyon, who are both going to MSI, they're both really big Kindred players and really good Kindred players for that matter. And I think that, if we definitely see a meta where Hecarim, Udyr kind of fall out of the meta, Kindred could be that champion to sort of come into the meta. And if we sort of do see any potential shift from, your tank-oriented to your more carry-oriented, I think that's kind of the champion in those players to do it.
And we will get into what the schedule's looking like later on, but I just do want to say the first game of MSI is Damwon versus Cloud9. and I'll be surprised if it's not high priority pick or ban early on, because I think the Kindred's going to come back as well. You got a couple of buffs and a couple of different patches. 2 Kindred players, come on, right?
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the Akali. I think Akali's busted. I think that champion's gross. I'm surprised we didn't see more of it in LEC playoffs. We did see it a little bit. I
Yep.
think that champion's just so strong. You don't need items, and you just one-shot people at level 6. What is that? I'm almost mad. Well, not. I'm a little bit mad. Let's say that, because I don't think that a champion that scales that well should be that strong early on. If you're going to be as OP as she is later on, I think it should be more the Kassadin style, where you need to hit level 16 or at least a level 11 before you start just one-shotting people. And I have seen Akali's do it on multiple occasions, get absolutely dumped on in lane, have no items, and then start one-shotting their lane opponent at level 6. That shouldn't be happening, and I'm surprised that we're not seeing more Akali because of that. But yeah.
Akali is just always one of those champions that, especially at the highest level, if its numbers are good enough, it will see play because of how great of a champion it is. It can play well with like little resource. It can play well from behind because it does have a lot of kill potential and does exert a lot of pressure just being in the game. Because when that champion's in the game in team fights, you basically have to focus it down and can't just let it, get freely to your backline, or it's most likely going to blow up a target. And with all these changes that are coming in, and given the players enough time with these changes to practice the champion, I definitely think it'll see play. The only other mid lane champion that I think could potentially be on the rise, and because we do have some other players in this tournament that are kind of known for this champion, is LeBlanc. LeBlanc's been getting some consistent buffs. We know Perks is a big LeBlanc player. If you remember, last time Perks played RNG, he was 1v9ing in Game 5 on LeBlanc at Worlds 2018. Yeah, I think LeBlanc could be potentially a champion that sees a little bit of play, mainly because with the meta being so control mage heavy, LeBlanc is that kind of champion which can completely just blow a game wide open should she get far ahead enough. So we'll have to see. I think for the most part though, mid lane meta is probably just going to stay the same, with it being heavy control mage, Orianna Victor, Seraphine. I don't see a whole lot changing there. The only two champs being LeBlanc or Akali, I think.
So I completely agree, actually, when you talk about LeBlanc, because honestly, when that champion is never like far out of meta, right? If she's not out of meta, if she is out of meta, she's never like too far away from being meta. And when you see a couple little buffs here and there, that's when that champion usually comes back. We've seen it so many times. How many LeBlancs have we seen in international play? It wouldn't surprise me, actually, if that's the most played champion in international play of all time. That one, or like a Zir or something.
I'd go with Orianna probably.
Or Orianna as well. But it would not surprise. I shouldn't say C played, pick or ban, I should say,
Oh.
because LeBlanc used to. I think actually, I don't know if this is an LCS stat or a world stat, but it is the most banned champion. I'm pretty sure it's an LCS stat. The most banned champion of all time in LCS is LeBlanc. I'm pretty sure of that. If someone thinks I'm wrong and has proof, please let us know in the
I think
comment
that
section or
does
something
though
like that.
have something to do with the like wacky
Season
rework
4?
that they. Oh, I was gonna say like the rework that they did in like season 6, season 7, where like
Oh
LeBlanc
yeah.
and Rengar were like 100% pick ban on like red side basically the whole season. So I would think that probably has something to do with it. But point being, the champion's strong when it's strong. So we'll just have to see.
Yeah. It's a staple as well. It's one that so many mid laners know how to play because it's been in meta so many times. I did want to mention one other mid laner, not because the buffs were crazy, but because they're buffs. And I think this champion was already playable, and that was Sylas. In point 6, he got some buffs, and we had already seen some Sylas being played in the LCS anyways. I can't remember exactly what they were. I looked at these earlier. Do you remember what they were in point 6, the buffs?
Nope. Maybe W buffs.
Regardless of what they were, I don't remember. I know I looked at this today, but I mean, when you're looking through 4 different patch notes, you kind of forget some stuff. Um, should have written it down. Whoops. Regardless, when a champion's already getting some play and then gets more buffs, you're like, oh, so we'll probably see a lot more of that, right?
Mhm.
So there's a decent chance that we see more Sylas, if we haven't been seeing already. Any other champions anywhere else you want to go?
The other one that I thought was pretty interesting and that a lot of pro players have actually been talking about is Lee Sin solo lane. Because Perks,
Yeah.
I've been watching a lot of Perks' stream recently, and he's been playing a ton of Lee Sin mid. And basically, anytime he's playing that champion, he basically just says, "God, this champion is so broken." Because they gave Lee Sin a fat buff to his E cooldown, which just makes him a lot just more playable in lane because Lee Sin just naturally has a lot of base damages, naturally has a lot of sustain in lane due to his W, and basically, I'll reiterate this again. Perks has just been saying that it's broken, and so I feel like just with him saying that and other pros also saying that Lee Sin solo lane is pretty bonkers, it'll probably get some play in scrims and might not actually reach like the MSI stage, but if it pops off in scrims, I guarantee you we're going to see some Lee Sin solo lane at MSI.
And let's like Perks, like we can trust him.
Yeah.
Like if Perks says something's busted, it's busted, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes that's just you gotta accept that that's the way it is. This guy knows the mid lane. That's no secret to anyone. I think in the patch notes they said that they intended on buffing his jungle clear with that, and
Yeah.
well, whoops! Now he's got some wave clear, I guess. So yeah, a little bit of a whoopsie there, perhaps. I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen enough of it to know exactly how strong it is or isn't. But I don't know. I'm down for seeing some Lee Sin mid. It's something that we haven't seen in God knows how long, and I'm always down for some new stuff.
And I mean, like, Lee Sin is always just like a staple champion in the jungle anyway. So, again, like, Lee Sin is another one of those champions where if the numbers are good and other champions aren't too broken, it's just naturally going to see play because of just how the champion kit is. And like we've mentioned before, we have so many good junglers at this tournament, especially like in the top four, with specifically Wei, Canyon, Blabber, and even El Yoya. I was looking up his stats, and he didn't play a lot of Lee Sin this season. But in his EU Masters days, he actually played a good amount of Lee Sin. So I think regardless, we'll probably see that champion pop up eventually. So
it's a flex pick at worst, right? Like because I mean, what jungler hasn't learned to play Lee Sin? That's another one that's been an absolute just staple always. Where you should be able to play Lee Sin if the time comes, if it comes into meta, you need to know how to play Lee Sin if you want to be a pro jungler. So there's that. Any other champions that you want to shout out before we get into item changes?
Well, I guess this is kind of gonna go in tandem with the item changes.
Go for it.
For supports, for the most part, I think we will probably see the support meta stay the same, just due to the strength of the engaged support champions. And while they are getting some nerfs in all of these patches, specifically Alistar, Rel, and Thresh, I still think just the role that support plays in the meta right now is too important for that playstyle to completely shift away. However, one champion that was sort of rising in popularity towards the end of playoffs, and that I think due to some buffs we'll probably see a lot more of, is Braum. We were seeing a lot of Braum in the LCS later on. We saw some in the LEC as well, specifically being paired with the Ashe, just because of the insane amount of CC it brings into the bot lane, and because it's just a pretty strong early game champion. Yeah, I think Braum is actually a champ that could pop up into the meta, but I do think for the most part it'll probably still just be a lot of Alistar, Rel, and Thresh.
See, I don't know because I think they buffed Staff of Flowing Water as well, didn't they?
Well, there was a
So like
bunch of
they
support
buffed
item
a few
changes.
enchanter items, I think. And so I'm not saying you're wrong because I do think that those champions will definitely have a chance of popping up. But I am let's just say I don't know where to think about this one. I don't know if we will just see those three supports come back again, or if we see enough for the enchanters to come back. We did see Lulu buffs, as I mentioned earlier. I think that champion got pretty significantly buffed, along with the items as well, along with Kog'Maw. Like that gives you an extra reason to play an enchanter if you're buffing an AD carry like Kog'Maw. So I'm really interested to see how that affects things. And then, but I completely agree though where you bring up Braum because he got 2 seconds off of his E cooldown, and that might not sound like a lot, but I think
And
that's a
his ult
lot,
got buffed.
honestly. At max rank, yes, and his ultimate got buffed. At max rank, his E is every 8 seconds, and with CDR, like you're putting up a wall, what, every 4 seconds or so? Like that's a lot. That's a lot of time to have your wall available. So that's another thing that's pretty OP. What are your thoughts on Everfrost and Lord Dominic's? We talked a little bit about Chemtank, and then some Triforce changes. Any thoughts on those?
Everfrost is still going to be built. I think it's the best AP
That item
mythic.
was super busted. Like on 0.5, everyone was building it because the cooldown was 20 seconds. Buffing it to 30 seconds, or rather nerfing it to 30 seconds, that should make some of those champions go away, right?
I
Question
don't know.
mark.
I still think the principle is like still the same. You weren't necessarily like using Everfrost for like the spam active on 20 seconds. You're using it because you're trying to pair it with champions that have a CC ability that can follow it, like a Silas chain, like a TF gold card. I don't know, like a Rise route. So I still think the
Yeah,
item will still be the most built item, and I think it's just due to the mythic passive that it has with giving ability power. It's just strong. Like
and maybe in theory, it's now the champions that should be building Everfrost will just continue to build it, and those champions will continue to be picked, and the ones that shouldn't are no longer going to be building it.
yeah,
That could be, in theory, what we might see. And then Lord Dominic's regard was just a little tiny nerf. I think it was 5 AD, but also maybe some gold cost as
it
well.
got upped
But
by
that was
100 gold
that
as
item was
well.
being built second, which I don't think is how they want that item to be built unless there's like a bunch of tanks or something like that. And so that's a maybe a little bit of a buff to tanks perhaps in the meta. Maybe I'm reading a little bit too much into that, because we were seeing a lot of double 80 carry comps. So maybe that's something that shades away from 80 carries and brings in more tanks. That's yet to be seen. And I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on Triforce? I don't really have any myself.
It's weird. I think Triforce was in a weird spot because the mythic passive was pretty weak. 10% attack speed's not that great. I think that's what it was at least. And now they shifted it to 3% attack speed, 3 AD, 3 ability haste, and 3 movement speed or something like that. One of those combinations of stuff. Um, I do think that, you know, Triforce, we can maybe see like Gangplank going back to the Triforce, maybe Irelia going back to the Triforce. I know we'll probably see some Irelia at MSI just due to like the LPL and the LCK. Um, yeah, it'll be weird.
It's a strong pick, and players love to flex with it. Like
Mhm.
it's a good flex, literally, as in like flex during champ select, but flex like muscles. Like that's just a pop off champion, and people, this is your time to shine on the world stage. So many players will say, "I want the Aurelia pick."
Yeah, I just think a
Uh,
lot of champions that originally built Triforce and synergized really well with it will could go back to it because the mythic passive is now just much better than it was and just gives a lot better stats.
yeah, yeah, and the one other item that I think we have to talk about is Shirelia's. I think that that item's
That
kind of
item seems a
busted.
bit broken. I feel like most supports nowadays are just rushing Shirelius first because move speed, to be honest, is just a broken stat.
It's
Uh,
so good to give your AD carry move speed and just let them go crazy.
mhm.
Especially again, I know broken record. I'm gonna sound like, but Lulu Cog, it's pretty
You
nice to
just
have
really
Shirelli.
want to see some Kog'Maw.
It's not that I want to. Did you see the patch notes, man? They're like, let's buff enchanters. Let's buff Kog'Maw, and I'm like, uh-oh.
It'll be
It's not
weird.
that I want to see. I don't
I
actually. I
don't
do
think we'll
want to
see
see
it.
it, but well, I think we'll see it banned or picked, but we will have to wait and see. One other champion I wanted to talk about, and I don't think that
This
this
is sounding
is.
troll already.
Yeah, well, yeah. Actually, there's a couple of them. One is Rammus, because I think his changes are freaking awesome. Is he good enough to come into pro play? I don't think so, honestly. But I would absolutely love to see it because I think that that champion is so sweet. That new ultimate is awesome, and it's really fun to watch. The
You've
other,
been watching too much Lambton Clash games, dude.
yeah,
They're
I mean,
clouding your
dude,
judgment here.
I've loved Rammus way before that, anyways. The other one is Mundo. And I know that that sounds like a meme, but Mundo Top, I actually think that one of the things that he struggled with a lot was his health regen not being that great and just getting, kind of owned in lane. And that's a champion that needs to survive laning phase to become beefy later. And with his health regen going up, with his cleave healing full now, if you landed a Q in the past, it would heal for 50% of the cost. Now it heals for the full 100. You got a little bit more sustain in lane with that and his passive. And so that could bring him around. Do I think it's incredibly likely? Not really, but I did want to shout out that I think Lane Mundo is a little bit underrated right now. Maybe we might see some of that.
Yeah, the last two that I'll quickly mention, which I think we could like see some fringe play or something, is Rumble and Shen. Uh, those are just two champions that always seem well. Rumble especially kind of sits right on the edge in pro play, and it can be used in very specific matchups. But he got some pretty nice buffs to his laning phase with his harpoon. I think it's like Electro Harpoon or something. And I think he also got some slight Q buffs. And then Shen, he got some alt buffs.
Did you mention? Sorry, did you mention the buffs to his passive? It's like 6% top max health or something.
I didn't
Or
know. I
did
didn't
I
know
say
all the
passive?
changes.
I don't know if I said it. Anyways, when he overheats, he just starts wailing on people. Every auto, he gets attack speed, I believe.
Oh,
And
yeah.
he starts wailing on people for 6% of their max HP. Another one I probably should have written down, but I think that's what it is. And so that's another champion that we've seen come into play quite a few times. So
Yeah, and Shen was the only one that I also thought I'd mention. It's, again, kind of like a fringe pro play champion, and buffs are welcome. I think Shen's great. Shen's just a really great champion. I always like to see it when
yep, me too.
top teams like kind of utilize the Shen ult aggressively as opposed to using it defensively. I think, you know, a sign that a team is really good and really coordinated are ones that, use their Shen ults offensively with dives, with like invades, with, like engages in terms of just Shen ulting a champion like a Nocturne, like a LeBlanc,
LeBlanc,
a Hecarim or something like that. So
yeah, I mean, our college top
Evelyn.
laner will know. I used to talk his ear off about learning Shen. I think that champion is so freaking good. Evelyn's another good one as well. Not quite in meta right now, but yeah, it works well with a lot of delivery picks, and it's just good for protect the something comps. We won't say what they are.
Okay.
The last thing that I'll say is that what I think is different with Worlds versus MSI is that MSI is shorter, and so sometimes the meta doesn't develop as quickly as or doesn't have enough time to develop like it would at Worlds, which is a longer tournament, which is not a good thing. So maybe that means that we actually don't see that much of a meta shift because it's only over the span of 2 or 3 weeks or something, rather than the month and a half that we get for Worlds. So that's the last thing I'll say about that.
Yeah, I think for the most part, though, there are a lot of changes in all of these patches, and specifically changes to a lot of the champions that are just so high presence in the meta. For the most part, a lot of support play has been strictly Alistar, Thrall, and Thresh, and we're seeing nerfs to those champions, buffs to like Braum and Enchanters. Same thing goes with jungle. We've been seeing a ton of Hecarim Udyr. We're seeing buffs to a lot of other jungle champions, which I think will bring new champions into the meta because of that. And I think the MSI meta is probably going to be a lot more exciting than this more boring jungle and support meta that we've seen.
When does 0.9 become live?
Wednesday or something.
So I guess that's another thing that I forgot to mention is that like the players that will be playing on 0.9 don't really have that much time to adapt to the patch. If the patch isn't even live yet and MSI starts in 10 days. So that's another thing that's a little bit wonky. Some people say good, some people say bad. I kind of fall in the middle. It's good because we're going to maybe see some new stuff, but I don't think it's necessarily fair to the players that you have such a small amount of time to adapt to a patch, and that could lead to a lot of variance, honestly. But
Maybe.
Nevertheless, time will tell. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the MSI teams because a lot of people, myself included, don't know anything about some of these teams. So I'll let you start us off, JNT, and lead the discussion on this one. Teach us a little bit about some of the teams and what we can maybe expect from what the player situation might look like.
Yeah, well, we'll start with Group A. And I think the first thing that we got to talk about with Group A is that the VCS is no longer able to compete at MSI due to COVID-19 restrictions. So there's been like a slight format change with Group A. Normally in this group stage of MSI, teams were going to play a double round robin where the top 2 advance and the other 2 get eliminated. But for Group A now, they're doing a quadruple round robin. And the top 2 teams advance and only 1 team gets eliminated.
Yeah, I don't think that changes a whole lot. I think let's say if there were 4 teams that were all about the same skill level, it would really suck to hear this because then you would know someone's really getting screwed or that the other groups are really getting screwed now that they like, do you get what I'm trying to say? They're like put at a mathematical disadvantage. Like, yes, that group has an advantage, but I don't think it would have changed much anyways for the outcome of the tournament. That makes me feel a little bit better about it, but I think that's also a little bit like presumptuous.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it'll change anything drastically, but I do think, I was trying to get on, well, I wasn't trying to get on, but my hotline take that I posted was basically that, Vietnam not being able to compete in 2 international events in a row now is actually kind of a big problem. And I kind of hope that Riot takes some early precautions for Worlds 2021 in terms of formatting and like an emergency format that they might have to switch to if the VCS cannot compete again at next Worlds, because it does kind of suck for the other wildcard regions because they're kind of looking at the situation like, hey, if we were drawn into this group and the VCS got kicked out, our chances of making it out of groups just exponentially went up because the way that the whole format was seeded was that, you had pool 1 team. There was one pool 1 team and one pool 2 team in every single group, and the rest was filled out by the wildcard regions. And basically, like, if you're the Unicorns of Love or pentanet.gg, you're kind of really happy about this because you now only have to beat that other team as opposed to having to beat that VCS team as well to compete for that spot. Because realistically, none of those teams are ever going to be able to take down the pool 1 teams, specifically RNG and Damwon. So it's kind of just like a bit of a shit situation, honestly, for the rest of the teams who are, really looking to get experience and like, I don't know, just more games under their belt for potentially Worlds, being like in the playing tournament for Worlds, which is what really matters. So kind of sucks, but it's not a big deal. Like there's nothing ruined over it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know if anyone heard that there was a lot of wind coming through. Like it's hella windy here, so I'm sorry if that came through the microphone. If it didn't, let's carry on. Yeah, no, I think you're completely right. I think that it's just a little bit of a buff to UOL and to pentanet.gg, and they still have to go to the Rumble stage, and through there, I think that's where you kind of get exposed anyways. I
Yeah.
think that could be an area where the major regions like the LCS or the LEC that I think people are rating a little bit lower than Damwon. Well, maybe not a little bit, but much lower than Damwon and RNG. That's where you could kind of get exposed, and I don't think it's just LCS, LEC that might get exposed in that area. It could be the Unicorns of Love or pentanet.gg. But anyways, the right system is in place so that regardless of the scuffed Group A, you'll still see the best team at the end of the day become the champion, I would have to believe.
I would have to agree with that. But yeah, we just wanted to quickly go through all the teams just because, most people out there probably don't know anything about these teams. So I just wanted to
give us a little bit of fun facts about each group.
We'll start with pentanet.gg because I talked about them last week and how I think their name sucks because it has .dg at the end of this, and this isn't 2015. But here's the one thing that pentanet.gg has going for them, and this is why they're going to make it out of this group, is because their jungler, Pabu, was at the All-Star 1v1 tournament in 2018, and he got to the finals and beat Doublelift, Faker, and Rookie in 1v1s. So that this guy is a god.
Let's go, Pabu. Pabu's a beast.
Yeah, and he lost the caps in the finals. But if your jungler beat Doublelift, Faker, and Rookie in 1v1s, he just has to be a god, no?
Was Doublelift on Lucian and he was on Victor?
I have no clue. Oh, okay. I just got it. Okay.
Anyways,
yeah, to be honest,
that is still kind of cool though. Like that's something like I'll be paying attention to Pabu now because I wouldn't have known that. So that's kind of cool.
I had no clue who any of their other players were. For the most part, the LCO is pretty new, considering that the the OPL got disbanded and then kind of got absorbed by the LCS, and then they just kind of formed it again.
The LCS took all of their good players, and they were left with the scraps.
So while I don't have a lot of hope for pentanet.gg, I just hope that Pabu pops off or something. Unicorns of Love is the other team in this group. People will remember them from Worlds 2020, where they actually did pretty well. And basically their roster is almost entirely the same. However, they have a new AD carry who was... Oh, God. It was Gadget. That was the guy who was at Worlds 2020 with them.
He played some Ziggs, I think.
He did. He was a mage bottom player. I think he also played Orianna bot in one game. They
got rid of one player, and it was the Ziggs guy? Damn, UOL. Come on.
And their new ADC is Lodic, who had some previous experience on Gambit. Went to Worlds Play-ins in 2018, where Gambit actually almost took down Cloud9 to actually make it to the main stage, 3-2. I think we're probably going to... Realistically, I was kind of memeing earlier, but Unicorns of Love is definitely going to be the other team to advance out of this group. They've had a lot of experience on international stages, and I don't know. It might be exciting to see them go up against RNG. Maybe they could take a game off them. Maybe they might pull out some cheese strat. We'll have to see.
Yeah, and then there's RNG. I mean, a lot of people will know all the RNG players, but in case you don't, you've got... Zhao Hu, which has been a long-time LPL player, long-time RNG player. He's playing in the top lane now. He's been there for quite some time, I believe. It used to be a mid laner. And then they have Wei. Wei is a guy that's actually been really, really hyped. I haven't watched a lot of LPL, but I've heard so much about this guy. So Wei, if there's a player to look out for RNG, I'd say it's probably him. They have Cryin in the mid lane. They have Gala AD carry, and they have Ming as their support. Some names that you might recognize like Ming. But yeah, they're good guys. This is a team that has a good chance of winning. Maybe not the front runner, but if they're not the front runner, then probably the second in line, second favorite. Let's put it that way.
I would say they're second. They're a close second, I would actually say. But we'll go on.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
Next,
we'll go on to Group B. We'll start at the bottom. We got Pain Gaming, BRTT in that. BRTT is just like a staple of the CBLOL and has been on pretty much every single Brazilian team that has gone and done well at an international tournament. What was it back in?
How accurate or inaccurate would it be to say that he's like double lift of Brazil?
Well, he is. I think that was like the whole meme back in the day, was that like he wanted to be like Doublelift and wanted to play against Doublelift, and he did at Worlds 2015 when I'm pretty sure Pain Gaming took a game off CLG in the group stage. I think they like both finished with the same 2-4 record in 2015 groups. But BRTT has been on pretty much every single CBLOL team that has done well at an international event or made an international event. He was on Flamengo last year. I don't remember the team he was on before that, but basically he's been on every single top team, CBLOL team. And the other notable guy that's on there is Tinones, back from Kaboom 2014. Anybody who's a C9 fan will know and love Kaboom from 2014. The other wildcard team in Group B is the Istanbul Wildcats from the TCL. I'll be honest, I didn't recognize a single one of their players' names. From what I gathered, looking them up pretty quickly, they're a very new team. It seems like a lot of these players are like fairly new to the scene in terms of they just haven't played for a very long time. So maybe these guys are going to be like the next superstars of the TCL, but I think they're going to get slapped up in this tournament.
Hopefully we see them bring something new, like maybe some exciting picks or something like that we haven't seen before. But yeah, I don't know much about them either myself.
Yeah.
What about PSG?
Yeah, well, PSG Towns, they're getting hit with the unfortunate things again that they play with. A sub AD for this tournament, because they're starting AD Unified, apparently has a collapsed lung. People will remember back in 2014 when High, back on Cloud9, had a collapsed lung when he went to the All-Star event, which is basically what MSI turned into in 2014. Cloud9 actually had to play with Link, former CLG mid laner, for that tournament. They actually did pretty well in the group stage. I think they placed second in the group stage, but then got slapped up by OMG in the quarterfinals. Yeah.
Oof. And then we got Mad Lions, right? And Mad Lions, people should know most of the Mad players, but you got Armut in the top lane, Elyoya in the jungle, Humanoid, Karzi, and Kaiser to round out the rest of the lineup. These are guys that are just fun to watch. Like, I'm really excited to see what a new team that's not G2 or Fnatic can do on the international stage, and we finally get a chance to see what that looks like. It's been quite some time.
Yeah,
or has it been forever? Did Alliance win in
Yeah, Alliance was number one EU seed at Worlds 2014.
At Worlds, but were they at MSI?
Well, no,
I don't remember.
Only split, well, apart from this one, the only split that hadn't been won by G2 or Fnatic was Alliance in only that one split, which was summer.
Just the summer?
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see Armut against all the other.
I love that guy, man.
Yeah,
love him.
I loved him back in Worlds 2020 play-ins, where he was basically like trying to carry Supermassive to the main stage, but he couldn't. I think they lost in like a 5-game series to somebody, but I remember they lost in a 5-game series to somebody, and I just remember Armut playing really, really well, and he really popped off in that finals against Rogue. We talked about his Wukong, I think 2 weeks ago. We'll have to see if he brings that out up against, the best top laners in the world, potentially in the later stages. I think him versus Khan and Xiaohu will be actually pretty exciting.
And then Group C.
Yeah,
the important one, right?
The important one for most of us NA fans. This group's actually really interesting because a lot of these teams that are in it, why I say this as a North American fan, because both Infinity Esports and Detonation Focus Me were at the play-in tournament with Cloud9 at Worlds 2018. Cloud9 was actually in the same group as Detonation Focus Me, and they had some pretty banger games. If you go back, I think I referenced this even like last week or 2 weeks ago, Detonation Focus Me almost beat Cloud9, but Licorice kind of had to come in there, save Cloud9 with a really nice Lissandra top performance. But yeah, they still have a bunch of players from that same Worlds 2018 run. 4 of their current roster members were on that team, their top laner, jungler, ADC, and their former coach, who's now their starting support. So it pretty much just seems that like this roster has been sticking together for quite a long time. They've basically been the top team in the LJL for like 3.5 years. They only didn't win one split, which was summer 2020, where they didn't actually go to Worlds because a different team did. And the other team from Worlds 2018 was Infinity Esports. They actually had a pretty good run in the play-in tournament. Ended up taking a game off of EDG. Actually took a game off G2 in that. Was it G2? Yeah, they took a game off G2 in the knockout stage after. And they still have a Solid Snake, their jungler from their Worlds 2018 run. And they also have White Lotus, who's like one of those like staple players from that region. Kind of like how BRTT is that guy from the CBLOL. White Lotus is the guy from the LLA.
And then you have Damwon and Cloud9 rounding out the rest of the group, and no strangers on either of these rosters. Rather, everyone pretty much knows who these players are. Cloud9, there's no need to say, but then Damwon, you got Khan, you got Canyon, you got Showmaker, and then you got Ghost and Barrel. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Damwon is pretty much the favorite to come out ahead in this tournament. Most people are saying they are still the best team in the world. They just won Worlds, so they haven't really changed much of their roster. Khan's been great. The only thing is he plays a little bit more tanks than Nuggery did. That would be the only bit of difference. He plays a fair bit of Scion, is what I've noticed. But yeah, it just seems like this team doesn't really make mistakes. They just dumped on Gen G in the finals, and Gen G was looking pretty darn good in my opinion. So that says a lot about Damwon in my opinion. So Cloud9's got their work cut out for them in their first game against them on May 6th.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, like you just said, this is a team that doesn't make mistakes. And with the Cloud9 roster, and especially, their playoff performances in North America, their early game was like super, super strong. And one of the main reasons why they got so many of their leads. And we kind of like the way that I see those two teams is it's kind of similar to how it was like Damwon versus G2 at Worlds 2020, where G2 was pretty reliant on getting early game leads because if you go to the late game against Damwon, you're basically never going to win. And I fear for Cloud9 that it's going to be the same story as it was for G2 at Worlds 2020.
It's a bit of a monk S on that one, but that pretty much
Hopefully,
rounds out
Cloud9
the
gets second
groups.
and they can move on.
Yeah, honestly, I still think Cloud9 should get out of this group, but nothing's ever set in stone. You never know. But yeah, that pretty much sets up what the groups are going to look like. That gives you guys a little bit of information on what to expect from some of these teams of like who the hell these players are. We will go into more detail next week because we got a whole other episode before MSI starts. So we promise we will go into more detail, but we felt like there's no reason to just cram everything for MSI this episode when we have another episode next week. And we still have to talk about Proving Grounds because there was actually a lot of viewership for Proving Grounds, and I think it was wildly successful. Are we good to get into that? Did I skip anything?
No, you're good.
Yeah, let's get into that. So, for those that don't know, No Org actually came out on top ahead of Cloud9 Academy. Now, what this says, I think a lot of people have a lot of varying different opinions on this, but the fact that No Org, no pun intended, wanted to pick up these players, and they ended up winning the whole thing, kind of speaks to perhaps that the scouting system might not be so great in North America, or perhaps that they just believe, yeah, maybe these are players that can win, but we've seen them play in the LCS before, and they think their careers are over. I don't think there's a lot of people that think that way, but I think there are definitely people that look at it that way. But it's very telling that you got a roster that has Viper. We know Viper. Onda, we know Onda. He's been around for a while. You got Big, you got Five Fire, and I'm missing who's the AD carry.
Is it Value?
Value looked great actually. Yeah, so these three of those players we've seen in the LCS before, and so a lot of people aren't too excited when they see, oh, it's just LCS players that win. But I would argue that maybe these guys' careers aren't over yet. I know people like to point at age all the time, and I think people are finally slowly starting to get away from the, oh, that player's old, so they're no good. I think people are finally realizing that fallacy, but I think it still exists. And I don't know. These guys looked pretty damn good, if you ask me.
Yeah, I mean, there's still, it's hard to say because there were a lot of players that are on No Org that I personally think still have a good shot of making, high level academy and possibly LCS. The main guys I want to point out are Viper, Five Fire, and Value. because we've seen Viper on the LCS stage before, and he's had a lot of success, but I think he just had a really bad 2020. He kind of lost his starting spot on FlyQuest, and then couldn't really get his mojo back on Dignitas. And it was fairly surprising to see him not on an Academy roster in 2020, because at one point, like, he's not a bad player by any means. I just think he had a really bad year. And
well, he was a solo Q1 trick for so long, and he kind of went to the LCS pretty quickly, right? So I would argue that this guy didn't exactly get all of the development that a player should get before going to the LCS level. Would you agree?
I mean, maybe. I just think that it was, I think just because of how bad his 2020 was, it probably turned off a lot of teams from picking him up, and people kind of forgot how good this guy actually was, because he was whipping out a ton of carry picks in the finals. We were kind of seeing Darshan getting thrown on tank duty, and Viper was whipping out stuff like the Set, the Lucian, the Akali, bunch of nice picks.
I think he played the Jace too. We didn't really like his Jace in the LCS though, did we?
NA Jace.
Yeah, it wasn't very good. But yeah, all that to say that I still don't think that these guys' careers are over, and I think that them winning this tournament does speak to how there's definitely some skill on this team, and I'm glad that a team that wasn't able to get signed from any org actually is the one that the team that comes out on top. I think that says a lot. And I want to look at the other team as well, because Cloud9 Academy has some really good players as well. To me, I think Copy is a guy that's really, really exciting to watch. Now, I did mention just a few minutes ago that people look too much at age and see an old player and go, oh, that guy's like, he's been around for so long, that guy's bad. I would say that I don't like that argument, but I don't mind the argument that this guy is still young and we still have yet to see a lot from him, and he's already looking good and he hasn't been in development for that long. That's an argument that I'm more for, and that's where Copy falls under. He's only 18 years old. And this is a guy that's already looking really good. When you're only 18, you are very, very new into your development. And so I think that there's possibly some room for growth there. And so I think that there could be a good chance that we see Copy being one of the staple mid laners in the LCS in a couple of years, maybe even sooner. Who knows?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of players in this series that I think will probably definitely see LCS or Academy play for sure. And I think that's the whole point of the whole amateur league, and why people are pushing it so hard is because we'd rather see these more up and coming players than your LCS veterans who have been in the league for so long that seem to transition into that role. Not to flame here a little bit, but Darshan, I don't really want to see any more of Darshan, and not because I think he's terrible or I think he's bad or anything like that. It's just because he's a known quantity. And the whole point of the amateur system is to find those players. Not specifically, I'm referencing in the top lane here, but like you just mentioned with Copy, or like we were just talking about with Value from No Org. These are definitely like players that we want to see more of, and it's good to see that they're succeeding at the amateur level and they're at the top of the amateur level, and then maybe that pushes them up into the academy level, and then they have to go through that whole process, and then maybe it's in a year's time they actually reach LCS.
Yeah. And another thing that I thought was really interesting was, like I mentioned before, there was a lot of viewership for this thing. And now let's define what a lot is. There was about 25,000 is where I saw it peak. It could have been a little bit higher, but I saw around 25,000 was where I saw the total concurrent viewership peak across Twitch and YouTube. And so I think that what we learned from this tournament is not that people want to watch amateur, or people want to watch Academy, but that people under the right circumstances actually do want to watch this stuff. Because I didn't think that it was anything the LCS pushed a lot. They gave a couple of tweets and whatnot, and I think they shouted it out once on broadcast, I believe. Someone could correct me if I'm wrong about that, but I do think that it's possible they could put more resources into this so that people know it's happening. You and I, the LCS a lot. And I don't know about you, but I didn't even know when this thing was happening. I never knew the schedule or anything like that. It was very slow. It was never updated on the actual LOL esports website. And so I think that there's just some small things they could do. And I think that viewership would go even higher than the 25K. And so just a thought for me that I thought they could put just a little bit more resources, a little bit more effort into promoting the product. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I definitely think it should be promoted more than it is, just because people are always talking about how they feel like Riot needs to bring more attention towards the lower tiers of professional League of Legends. But the one thing that I just wanted to touch on in terms of like the viewership and kind of another discussion that people had is that some people dislike that there are even academy teams or amateur teams that are owned by LCS teams like the Dignitas Mirage team and stuff like that. But one thing that I think is actually a great benefit to this whole academy system, with having your big name orgs being involved in it, it brings more attention actually to it. And like you just said, there's a ton of viewership. And I think that's because we have teams like Cloud9 who have these kinds of players that people are interested in. And I would hate for the whole scene. Like I would have felt so bad if it was two actual like true amateurs, like no org teams, like where there are two teams in the finals that aren't under the banner of a big name organization, and like just nobody knows what's going on, nobody watches it, and there's no notoriety gained from it. Because what we saw from this tournament was that the winners of no org were getting a ton of praise on social media. They were getting a lot of notice just around the entire scene. I don't think a lot of people even knew who Five Fire was before the finals, and after the finals he's getting a ton of love on Twitter, and that's really great to see, because I think he only got a limited time on EG Academy before this season, because he was basically like an emergency backup, because EG's Academy mid they wanted to import couldn't because of COVID and like visa issues. So it was really great to see him specifically win this tournament and get a lot of praise on Twitter, because I actually think he's a pretty solid player, and he
Yeah, and
performed
so
very well.
actually, I didn't really know much about Five Fire, and I was doing a bit of research on a bunch of them, but apparently Five Fire was at LAN ETS in 2019 when we were there. He played for Bloody Gaming. That's the
He
team that ended
also,
up
well, yeah,
winning.
one of the
So
teams we lost to, like Value was on at like Lane ETS.
yeah, actually, that was the other thing. I was talking with Scott about that, a friend of ours. That yeah. Anyways, so a few of these guys were at LAN ETS not too long ago, so it's possible that we actually had some guys go up against them. Anyways, that's not really all that important. A little bit of a tangent there. Um, the one other thing. So when we were watching Hotline League, and I thought Kelsey Moser made a really good point. I think that it's something that's maybe obvious to a lot of people, but I don't think is said enough, and that's that you don't need to be on a winning team to be a good player. And she was really basically trying to get at the way scouting works in North America is a flawed system, because so many people are looking to the winners rather than looking at who's improving or who's good and might be on a bad team. And that sounds really obvious, right? But I do think she's right that it's like when a team wins, that's the team that gets all the attention. But like we just saw three ex LCS players win this tournament, and that's not exactly what Proving Grounds is all about. It is a lot about up and coming players as well. And she basically was making the point that it's great that these guys that won are getting a lot of attention, but there's a lot of other players that should get attention as well, because there's some players that had some really good tournaments and didn't necessarily win. And I just think that Kelsey has a really good mind for how the amateur system works, and she's always got really good takes about amateur and academy. And I just think it's something that needs to be echoed. So just shout out to her for that.
Yeah, I think it's just the easy thing to do is to
Mm-hmm.
pick the players from the winning teams or the better performing teams, and it's much more work to really go back, watch a lot of these games, and take a deep dive specifically to the losing teams, because it's a lot easier to pick out what a player is doing right from the winning team than what a player is doing right if they're on the losing team, because the whole
Mm-hmm.
situation and the whole flow of the game obviously just looks bad. And as you mentioned, she has a good mind for picking out those moments and those players who aren't necessarily on those really good performing teams, but are still doing a lot of work for their team in losing efforts.
Yeah, and for this being the first Proving Grounds, I think there was a bunch of success, and I think that there's a lot of hype going into the next Proving Grounds, because there will be another one come summer, right?
Mhm.
So I think that what this did for having the first Proving Grounds, such a massive success, and I think we'll see that grow, and hopefully that will lead over into summer as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, any other thoughts on Proving Grounds, or are we good with that?
Nope.
All right, let's move on. There's a lot of stuff that came up last minute, guys. So we will get through all of this stuff. But yeah, let's go through quick news. Lots of last minute news making the
Mm-hmm.
news.
Nice.
Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
First up, again, we're starting at the beginning of the week. Gambit Esports said they're leaving League of Legends. They're no longer going to be a part of it. Pretty storied org for the most part. We mentioned one of the players on Unicorns of Love played on Gambit in 2018. Gambit's been basically a League of Legends team since 2013, and before that was Moscow 5, where their players were Moscow 5, and It's pretty, yeah, pretty big
Yeah, people
loss.
look when they think about this team, they look back and think of guys like Alex Each
Mm.
and Diamond, and I think Edward too.
Edward,
He
yep.
played for them. So those were the three. Maybe there's a couple more, but those were the three that a lot of people think of when they think Gambit Esports.
Hmm.
It's yeah, it is pretty unfortunate, but sometimes teams just fall. You know, we definitely have seen it with CLG.
Hmm.
Mind you, they're not folding their team, but we've definitely seen some teams that used to be on top and, well, they don't hold that spot forever. So unfortunately, Gambit was one that couldn't hold on. I guess they were in a region that didn't exactly have the most fans either, and so
Hmm.
sometimes you just don't got the funding, and so that's rip Gambit, and nothing more to say for me.
Yeah. Speaking of amateur and academy, in the LEC, teams will no longer be required to have an academy team in the regional leagues starting in 2022. And to note, Rogue was the only team to vote against this. It was a 9-1 vote with the 10 LEC teams.
This doesn't bother me. I don't know how you feel about it, or I don't know how other people feel about it. Um, I would say that every team should be able to set up their own version of what they think success is as far as developing players, and whether that's having them just play in the regional leagues like the French league or the Spanish league or so on and so forth. That's fine with me, whatever you think is best. So I mean, you don't have to have an amateur team, or rather an academy team, but I mean, you can have one if you want one. So yeah, it doesn't really bother me that much. I
Yeah,
think we've seen plenty of teams or plenty of players come out of EU Masters already to say that like they're getting their talent regardless.
I think the whole regional league system is already strong enough to where they don't need the big name organizations fielding a team. Like if you were to go
Mhm.
to NA and say uh, LCS teams no longer have to field an academy team, like go look at that amateur scene in terms of like all the academy teams that were in there. Uh, there was a lot of them, and a lot of them finished higher up. And as we just mentioned, no org was really the only one to beat all of those teams. And I think if you took out all of those academy teams, the amateur scene would basically be doomed. And I
Yeah,
think
it would be
they
worse
need
in
to
the
get a
LCS for
stronger
sure.
base, and I think EU already has a strong base of the regional league system and other teams that it's not a necessity for LEC teams to have a team in these leagues.
Yeah, I would be worried if it was the LCS. I'm not
Yeah.
worried as it's the LEC.
Mm-hmm.
What's next?
Back to LEC. Ender is leaving the LEC broadcast team. Says he's apparently, he's moving back to Los Angeles, and that he is potentially going to be part of the LCS broadcast or do some appearances on the LCS broadcast or try to transition to Valorant.
So I don't doubt that he'll probably want to do some stuff with the LCS, but my guess is that he's probably more interested in the Valorant scene.
Mm.
Because I mean, it's very evident he loves working with the LEC, and so I don't think he would leave the LEC just to come over to the LCS, where he's already got so much going for him in that league. So my guess is that he's going to angle more towards Valorant. I don't want to speak for him. He said in his video exactly what you said, that he thinks he might do some LCS stuff and some Valorant stuff. So my guess is that he'll try to do as much as he can, and I think he wanted to do some. Did he mention full time streaming, or am I coming up with that on my own?
I don't know. Didn't remember that.
I thought he said something about streaming. There's a video I'm sure you guys can find on Reddit, or if you just YouTube or Google it, whatever, you will find it. So it's only about a 3 minute video, so you'll find his stuff on there if you look for it.
We'll just continue with all the EU stuff. Nuke Duck, former Astralis and Origin mid laner, is rumored to be joining Excel for the summer split.
So this is really interesting to me, because I remember when we were talking about what kind of moves LEC teams could make. I remember saying that I didn't think too much of Checolad at this point in time. He's still a young player; he could still develop and become a great player. But at this point in time, he looked to me like he was one of the things that was holding back XL. And that's because I actually still think XL is a great team in the bot lane and their top lane. I think it's their mid jungle that's a problem, honestly. I do think that they need a better jungler. Maybe the mid lane swap is enough to make this team good. I still think they're a decent team though, regardless, even if they didn't make any changes. The weird thing is that Nuka did not have such a great uh I would say last year
I say
playing
year
in
and a
the
half.
LEC. Yeah. Well, I think he was good in spring of last year. So
Yeah.
that's why I only say year. He had a pretty good spring. His summer was not that great. And so that's why it's interesting to me that Nuke Duck is getting another shot. I will say I've always been a fan of Nuke Duck. He plays a very large champion pool. So that's something that's exciting, whether that's, you know, going to be something as an asset, I don't know, because you need to be able to play these champions at a high LEC level. So, I mean, being able to play these champions is one thing, being able to play them well is another. And so that's my worry with Nuke Duck. But I'm just a fan, and so I am happy that he's getting another shot with a team that I think has quite a few good pieces on them.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see. I think if you insert, the way that Nuke Duck was performing, I think at best it's a side grade. So I think they're
Yeah.
hoping that Nuke Duck is going to come back to form a little bit and will play better than he's previously been doing. Because
I'm a little bit nervous. Yeah.
like if it's bad Nuke Duck, then this is just one of those situations where I'd rather have them stick with Checolad, and he's a pretty young player, like you said.
Give him more time. Yeah.
But I mean, again, teams are going to want to do what they have to do to make a push for Worlds or playoffs or what have you. And if they feel that this is the move to do that, I can't really fault them for doing that. Again, we'll stick on the EU news. We got two more things out of EU. One of the teams or organizations that was rumored to potentially buy Schalke's LEC slot was Heroic, and there was another one which I completely forget, but I just wanted to specifically mention Heroic because they're definitely the bigger brand in terms of an org. If you're a fan of CSGO, you'll know they just won, I think it was ESL Pro League, and there was like a pretty pop-off clip that Cadian had winning the tournament over there. I think Heroic's a really great org, especially in CSGO. I've been following more CSGO than I have been in the past, but Heroic's been around in CS for like 4, maybe 5 years at this point. And I think they'd be a quality addition to the LEC if Schalke did end up selling their spot.
Heretics was the other one.
No fucking clue what that is.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say I know either. So, yep. But I'm just looking at the tweet.
Okay. Last thing out of EU. Apparently, we got the sort of Niski rumors last week that he was potentially on the move. Ended up not happening. But Bwipo and Selfmade reportedly, well, not reportedly, Selfmade said that they declined a contract extension offer from Fnatic.
Yeah, this one's interesting to me because there's a couple of ways of thinking about this one. One is, oh no, Bwipo's and Selfmade don't want to play in Fnatic anymore and they want to leave. The other one, though, which I think is more likely, is there's just a lot of players that don't know what their move is going to be until the end of the season. Why commit to anything now? That's the way I look at it. I don't think that this says they don't want to play for Fnatic. I think that there's so much that happens at the end of a year that you want to know what your options are. Why wouldn't you explore what your options are before re-signing? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I don't think it's time for Fnatic fans to just panic. And the other thing I'll say as well is that Bwipo said he's admitted that he did not have a good split and that this split coming up is very important to him. If he looks better in the split coming up, he'll probably be able to ask for a higher paying contract than what he would get right now as a player. Selfmade, I would also say, was better last year. The thing is, it's not that I think he got worse. It's that I think that his play style was better fit to last year's meta, where he could play a bunch of carry picks. This time, it's kind of the Udi or Hecarim that we've been talking about, and so that could be another thing that he's hoping. Maybe he's hoping for a meta shift, and that he can show his true skill and get back to that carry potential that we've seen with him. So, all this to say, I don't think it's time for Fnatic fans to panic.
Yeah, I'm definitely more on the side that they're probably just waiting for Summer Split to play out, and there's no point in getting locked into something right now when you didn't have that great of a spring split. Fnatic definitely has a high opinion of themselves in terms of like what their ceiling is in the LEC in their minds, and I think they have the individual players to do it, can compete with the G2s, with the Rogues, with the Mad Lions, but they just didn't have that great of a spring, and we'll really have to see where that goes in summer. But like you said, should their performances get a lot better in summer, that means they can ask for a higher pay. They can ask for a better contract. That can mean, other teams will approach them as free agents. I know the thing everybody wants to probably talk about is Yanko's been underperforming on G2. If they decide to go in a different direction, and there was like an episode way back where Yanko's, what was it? There was a clip of Perks saying that Yanko's might want to come to NA next year being 2022. Who knows? Maybe jungle spot available on G2. Selfmade has a better split. I think anyone can probably argue that Selfmade would probably be the best available jungler, because I wouldn't think that Elyoya or Inspired would become available. So G2 Selfmade, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, it's a good point. It is possible. I think it's too early to say that will happen. I don't think anyone's saying that. I think the possibility is worth mentioning.
Exactly. That's the whole point. It's like, why completely shut that door by signing a contract extension when you don't know what's going to happen, you don't know how your team's going to perform in summer, and you don't know how you're going to perform. So
Yeah,
it.
and both of them I would say had lower than expectation splits, and so they want to bounce back.
Mhm.
That's pretty simple to me.
All right, no more EU news. We got some MSI news though for both RNG and Cloud9. Both of their head coaches, C9 being Reignover and RNG being Tabe, their coaches actually have to coach remotely for MSI because in RNG's case, Tabe's passport expired, and in Cloud9's case, Reignover can't travel due to quote unquote immigration reasons.
Yeah, so I don't know if Rainovers is the same as Tabe. What I will say is that not having your passport ready that's just not acceptable. Like you are a coach of a team that is very well known for making it to international tournaments. In what world do you let your passport expire when that's what you do? I
Yeah.
don't know how that happens. And I don't know how there is no one else in the organization, like a team manager or something like that, that's making sure that that's a box that's checked off on the to-do list. I'm surprised that happens. And if it's the same thing for Reignover, I'm also surprised with that as well. Now, they were a little bit more vague with maybe to avoid backlash, or maybe it is something that's out of their control. You got to give benefit of the
Mm-hmm.
doubt. But I think that hurts teams. I do not think that, look, you can still coach online for sure, but I definitely think that being in person is just better, right? It just has to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's something that I don't know if I would say it hurts these teams a lot, but you could say it's definitely not ideal. So a little bit of a disadvantage there for both of those squads.
Next up, the LCS announced that uh, they're having no fans in the broadcast studio for the summer split. I didn't even know for the first of all that they even announced that they were going to be back in studio for the summer split. But that's basically what they're making it sound like, and then they just said no fans. So I didn't know if there was an announcement beforehand saying that they were going to be fully back in studio for summer, but it kind of seems like they are with this post about there being no fans.
It is looking that way, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So I
Why come
didn't
out and
know
say that
either.
if you're not doing it?
Well, maybe they did. Maybe we just missed it. It's possible.
Have
I
you?
didn't see it,
I
anyways.
feel like we would have
You and
seen
I
it
are
though.
pretty good at. I mean,
Like,
we go through this stuff every week. We go through Twitter. We go through Reddit. But like I said, it is possible that we missed it. So who knows? But I think that's okay. I don't mind. Like, look, if you got to take precautions, take precautions. I'm not going to be the ones that say, "Damn you! How can you not let fans in the building?" Blah blah blah. I don't know what their situations are. I'm sure they have a lot. They have people that have put a lot more thought into it and have a lot more information than I do. Who am I to say what they should do with that? So whatever, that's fine.
and last up, uh, Riot Games put out a competitive ruling for Solified, which was this was previously in the news, but it basically came out that Solified, which is an amateur team, actually had not been paying their players, and so Riot forced them to. What did they do? They just forced them out of proving grounds and got all the players released from their contracts and whatnot. This is the team with.
Well, I think the players just left because they
Oh,
weren't
did they?
getting paid. If
Okay.
I guess I'm not 100% on that, but the long story short, guys, is they weren't paying their players, and so the players
Yeah.
said, "Okay, goodbye." And then the owner, I believe it's the owner, decided to make a little statement,
Oh
and
God, he looks like an
that didn't
asshole.
go, that didn't go well for him because he gave excuses about COVID. Just so people know, this team is not a team that was put together before COVID, so COVID was already happening when this team was put together. So there's that.
Mm-hmm.
And then he made excuses that like you couldn't get money transferred internationally, and a bunch of people have said that that's something you can definitely do. And then there was talks about how some of these contracts were in six figures, which is absolutely insane for an amateur team. And so it just sounds like some of these players were just completely I don't know what the word is, fooled perhaps.
Yeah,
I'm sure some of them probably feel like fools, and it's just so unfortunate that like these are guys that we know really well. If you're a fan of the LCS, like Dokla's on there. Who's their jungler?
I think it was Winston.
It was Winston. Okay, and who's their mid? As
I
soon
don't
as I hear
know.
the name, I'll remember it. But then Apollo and Zazel are on the squad as
Yeah,
well. Like these are guys that we know, and so that just kind of sucks. Like, ah, damn. What else is new? And then the freaking guy, he got a lot of
their mid
backlash.
was Tuesday. I just looked it up.
Oh yes, yes, yes. Right. And they got a lot of backlash too. And oh my god. The best was Captain Flowers this won't be a direct quote, but I'll pretty much get the gist of it. Was he said something along the lines of like, it must be difficult to wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and just see an absolute snake every day.
Yeah.
He had it was a pretty fire tweet. Not gonna lie, I liked it a lot. But there was a lot of people coming out and just basically just dumping on this guy for what he said, and I loved it. At the end of his twit longer, he says, "Through thick and thin, Solified is here to fucking stay."
Dude, like,
I
man,
hope not, and I think most people hope not.
he just made an ass out of himself by posting this twit longer. Like, I don't know, did he like pay all? Did he use all of his fucking money to hire like the TSM marketing people or what? So, like, I don't get
What's
it,
the
dude.
game plan with this twit longer,
Yeah, like
man?
the thing that really rubbed me the wrong way when I read the competitive ruling on LOL Esports was that, like basically he had been making up a bunch of excuses and putting off paying the players, using a bunch of excuses, and the players had to like approach him at some point. It was two of the players. They didn't name who the players were, but basically like had to come to him and say like, hey, like we need this money to like to be actually like to pay for stuff and live our lives, and they couldn't even do that. So it just seems like really scummy what they were doing and everything, and I'm glad that they're out of here, and I don't want to hear more about this fucking guy.
And I think that's how most people feel about it.
Yeah.
I mean, players not sports, name a more iconic duo. Like,
Yeah.
this is so like, this should not be happening anymore. Stop that. Stop it now.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, I've said my piece on it. It sucks, and we hope that those guys end up finding some other teams to play for. Because I mean, it's just a group of really good guys, right? Like, it's just those are all players that have been around for so long, and we know so many good things about them.
Mhm.
Specifically, Apollo. How can you do this to Apollo?
He's like the nicest guy ever in
Literally the
esports.
nicest guy. Actually, the nicest guy to ever play Pro League of Legends.
For sure.
Maybe Sword Art. But anyways, that's enough of that. And I think that's going to do it for this episode, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, again, thank you guys so much. We had a bunch of new viewers last week, so we just want to shout out everyone again. Your guys' support has been great. We've seen a lot of growth with the channel. For those of you that are coming back every week and are really enjoying our content and want to support us, just so you guys know, we are affiliate on Twitch now. We didn't really make a huge statement about it, and we haven't really mentioned it too many times. So if you do want to sub to us on Twitch, that is available. That's something you can do to support us on there. Or we do have a Patreon page as well. You can find that in descriptions and on the Twitch panel and whatnot. So thank you guys all so much for your support. It's been great, and J&T and I are really happy with the growth that we've seen of this channel, and we want to keep it going. And that doesn't happen without you guys. So thanks so much. J&T, anything else you want to shout out?
Nope, I just gave him a thumbs up 3 times now.
I do want to mention before we go that the schedule might get a little wonky with MSI being a little bit different. So we do plan to have another episode next Monday.
We'll talk more about the MSI teams and whatnot.
Yes. Following that, we will do an episode on the following Tuesday, and then another Tuesday, and then back to Mondays. So next week, everything's normal. The following 2 weeks, we will do Tuesday and Tuesday, and then we will get back to Mondays again. That's the current plan for now. If things change, we'll obviously notify you guys. But yeah, with MSI schedule being a little bit wonky, things are kind of all over the place. And so that's the current plan for now. But that's going to be it for this episode. Thanks, guys. Episode 39 is in the books, and we will see you guys next Monday.